Good morning. It's great to be here. First of all, I don't want to be remiss in failing to point out and thank the organizers, Sergey and everybody else. You've been working very hard on this conference, and we're pleased to be here. It's delightful to see so many people, even though what feels to be like 12 o'clock in the morning, given the time difference, or at least for me, and also given the sunrise at 10:20, I believe, according to the calendar. So be there as it may, I think we should get started slightly belatedly. I try to stick to an hour. I do have an optional element, somewhat of a workshop type aspect of it, because what I will tell you, at least part of which, we have implemented in a tool. And I believe that is clearly an area where we need to work on further, particularly in the area of systemic risk, the topic of my talk. Because many models that exist at the moment are the result of one-offs. We get together, you find an interesting data set, we have an interesting idea, develop a theoretical model. But that's it. You publish a paper, hopefully in a good journal, and then you move on. But what we need is systemic risk measurement as part of modeling, as part of macroprudential supervision. And I will speak slowly now, because clearly talking too fast for our interpreters. What we need in systemic risk modeling and measurement is a continuous effort to monitor risks globally, consistently, and effectively. And that is not the case at present. Now, I will spare you a joke about the temperature difference between Bermuda and Tarn, clearly. And I can tell you it's, Bermuda is at the moment 72 degrees Fahrenheit. That's 22 degrees centigrade. But nevertheless, I can't resist one joke, which is one of my favorites, and it fits very well the situation we have here at the moment. You might know, in North America, particularly in the US, the indigenous Indians have been, more than 100 years ago, have entered into an exchange, a land swap with the federal government. And they now live, at least those that choose to do so, live in special areas, that they're reservations. And the joke is about an Indian tribe in North Dakota. So it goes as this. So that tribe in North Dakota elected a new chief. The old chief stepped down, retired, and they elected a new, young, energetic chief to that tribe. And North Dakota is an area in the US, north, that is subject to extreme fluctuations in temperatures. It can get quite hot in summer, but extremely cold, like Perm, in winter. So the new, energetic tribal chief assembles his tribe one day in summer, and they deliberate on many things, amongst of which the most important thing is how to prepare for winter. So the chief asks his tribe, "Don't tell me, what should we do about winter? How much wood should we collect?" The tribe said, "Well, the old chief collected this much wood, just these many piles you see over here. I think it's okay." So the chief thinks about it and says, "Okay, we don't want to advocate too much, a new chief, much experience, let's just collect as much wood as we usually do, like the old chief." Okay. Said and done. He slept. Next morning, overnight, it occurred to him, well, maybe as a new chief I want to prove myself. I want to, have an extra sort of buffer for winter, just in case the winter is a bit harsher than expected. I don't want to disappoint my new tribe, right? I'm a new leader. So he assembles the tribe and tells them, well, I've thought about it, slept one night, and next morning it occurred to me, we might want to collect a bit more wood. So the tribe complied, and they collected more wood. Since it was a new chief, he thought, well, you know, I want to get that confirmation. I'm quite sure whether I made the right choice. And, you know, better call the National Weather Service. I'm sure you have that in Russia too, a National Weather Service that monitors, you know, the temperature and the climate throughout the country. So I called up the National Weather Service. Asked them, so what do you expect the winter to be like this year? And they responded, oh, you know, it might be just slightly colder than normal in spring. You know, he was right. Collected more wood, as the tribe to collect more wood, confirmed himself as a leader. So hangs up the phone, goes back to his tribe, declares, you know, that he was right in being a bit more clairvoyant. But he was still not quite sure. A few days go by and he thinks, well, you know, the National Weather Service confirmed, but, you know, I want to be extra sure. Let's collect a bit more wood. So next morning he collects the tribe, as it was the tribe gathers around him, and he tells the tribe, well, you know, got a confirmation from the National Weather Service. Changed my mind. I think we should still collect a bit more wood. Just a smidge, just a bit more. So I believe the winter could be a bit harsher. So crowd disperses, collect more wood. Okay, let's call the National Weather Service again. So call someone again and ask, tell me, how's the winter like this winter? How's the winter like this year in North Dakota? What do you think? National Weather Service responds, well, you know, we've just updated our forecast and we believe the winter is going to be harsher. It's going to be colder. Hangs up. Now he feels really good about himself. But he's also in doubt. First, the old chief instructed the crowd, the tribe, to collect just a normal amount of wood. Then they collected a bit more. National Weather Service said it's going to be harsher. So, yet again, he instructs the tribe to collect more wood, because the National Weather Service also changed, you know, their forecast. So it might just be that the winter might be even harsher than expected. So he instructs the tribe to collect even more wood. Assembles them, gives them the order, and they collect more wood, go out in the woods and collect more wood for the tribe to be prepared for the harsh winter. Next morning they come back, report that the job's been done, and the chief is content. But he thought, well, you know, I've called the National Weather Service once, I've called them twice, let's call them again and see whether I'm really right. So he calls them again, and the National Weather Service responds to his question how the winter might be like this year. It's going to be a brutal winter. It's going to be the coldest winter in 50 years, so better be prepared. And chief responds, stunned. You are the National Weather Service. You ran all these models, right? You're supposed to be very accurate in your forecast. So I called you once. You told me it's going to be slightly harsher than normal. I called you twice, the second time around. You tell me it's going to be much cooler, or much colder than normal. And now I'm calling you the third time. You tell me it's going to be the worst winter ever. How come? What's your data point? What's your statistical basis to make that forecast? National Weather Service responds, well, you know, we've been told the North Dakota Indians are collecting wood like crazy. What this joke is basically telling you is a few things. Going back to Alexei's comment yesterday, when you make forecasts, first of all, the golden rule applies. You shouldn't forecast anything, especially not the future. But when you do forecast, and when you have to make a decision, because we have to make decisions, when action is warranted, then it's important how decisions are being made. face in financial markets, but also in institutions, there's some self-eliciting momentum, right? And that Jobst also talks about this, right? That you make a decision, and your decision has implications on other things, and you go round and round and round and round. This self-perpetuating dynamic might lead to outcomes that are not necessarily desirable. So like the North Dakota Indians, we might find ourselves in a situation where we expect something that occurs because of our own actions or our own inability to look through what's really true. So I hope some of this in this joke will be discernible in my talk today, and I do hope that it's going to be interesting for you. If not, then I'll take cues, polite cues from you, coughing or an intervention as a sign that I should either stop there, shut up, or make it more exciting. Also to the translators, thank you very much for bearing with me on that joke, which was completely unprepared. You're doing a great job. Disclaimer. The usual disclaimer applies. I'm right now in transition. I'm leaving the Real Monetary Authority and joining the IMF in a senior position, and so the disclaimer relates to both institutions. So everything I say are my own views and should not be attributed to either organization. So what I thought we'll do today, I talk a bit about systemic risk measurement, developing measures of dependence, and then I will also do a bit of self-promotion. I present the systemic CCA model, which is a technique I've developed, and continue to develop while I was at the BMA as a consultant to the IMF, in the context of these financial sector assessment programs Sergey talked about in his initial remarks. So risk in decision making, I think I found a quote from Mr. Rubin, former Secretary of the Treasury in the US, which is very fitting to this talk and to the conference in general, I believe. And what he says also relates to the joke I've mentioned, and I told you before. What he says is, in reflection of his tenure as Secretary of the Treasury, he says, first, the only certainty is that there is no certainty. Second, every decision as a consequence is a matter of weighting probabilities. Third, despite all the uncertainty, we must decide, we must act. An executive decision or a collective decision needs to be made despite all odds and despite the invariable uncertainty. And fourthly, we need to judge decisions not only by their outcome, but also the manner in which they're being generated and how a decision comes about. Now, I think that really summarizes risk management to the point. It is also a very stark reminder of some of the technical elements we've discussed yesterday, but we also discussed today. So there's only so much in terms of luck. Much of it is also attributable to comprehensive preparation to deal with that uncertainty. Now, first of all, definition of systemic risk. What is systemic risk? Here you have on the slide just a brief synopsis. So we have individual or collective arrangements that can lead directly to distress in the financial sector and or amplify consequences with adverse effects for the real economy. these 2 points speak to 2 properties of systemic risk, which are sometimes confused. At the same time, in defense, we have not come up with an, should I say, axiomatic catalog of properties of systemic risk measures. But what we do know is that some institutions, some arrangements, some markets can, by virtue of failure, breakdown, rupture, corrosion, degrading, can cause directly systemic risk. And then there are arrangements, propositions that can suffer from systemic risk and amplify. To give you an example, if a bank is heavily involved in a particular activity, and that activity is hardly substitutable in the payments and settlement system or in the underwriting and so on, then that firm is systemically important, because that firm, its failure, will cause some problems for others. That is a contribution to systemic risk. Then there are other institutions, arrangements, that participate in systemic risk. These are firms that are large, but might not actively cause, by virtue of their failure, systemic risk. For instance, insurance companies. Insurance companies have huge portfolio of investments, to the extent they might even move markets based on their portfolio. But they themselves, if they were failing, wouldn't necessarily cause systemic risk. But if a big firm were to fail, let's say, just take a completely hypothetical example, a big firm like General Motors would fail. General Motors has many portfolios in some insurance companies. If General Motors were to fail, it would have an impact on the investment portfolio of an insurance company. And that could cause an insurance company to fail. This is a different type of systemic risk, because the insurance company itself is not a contributor to systemic risk, but it suffers and then amplifies. So we need to carefully distinguish here. And then you also have, of course, alternative definitions of systemic risk, like the Financial System Oversight Council in the US, SSOC, has come up with its own definition of systemic risk, but also national institutions. In fact, some jurisdictions have come up with their own laws on macroprudential surveillance, and that includes a definition of what constitutes systemic risk. That slide I've anticipated already in my remarks just before. Systemic risk is part of macroprudential policy and surveillance, MPS. And macroprudential policy and surveillance is defined by 3 characteristics. So we have the detection, monitoring, and mitigating of a buildup of systemic risks, vulnerabilities. We have the identification of those vulnerabilities, common exposures, interlinkages, and so on. And then finally, the policy element, once you've monitored what happens over time, you want to map out risk scenarios. You want to design, prioritize policy, and design the right measures that can combat, mitigate, eliminate these vulnerabilities. Or, as I mentioned here, reduce the probability and the potential of impact. So these go hand in hand, really, and they establish a value chain of effective macroprudential policy and surveillance. And systemic risk is not hard to discern. It is part and parcel of this. So you cannot do you cannot do macro-potential surveillance without having a good idea of what is systemic and what isn't.